Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be connected again. Welcome to this regional orientation webinar for the UN Biodiversity Lab for the English-speaking Latin America and the Caribbean. This webinar is part of the 6NR technical webinar series. I am Marion Marigot, technical specialist for the 6NR project and your facilitator for this webinar. I warmly welcome you all to this webinar session. The countries invited to this region's virtual orientation workshops are Antigua and Barbuda, Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, Grenada, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago. If you're not associated with one of these countries, do not worry. That means that we have assigned your country to a session that we think would work better for you in terms of timing and/or language. However, if this session suits you, you're more than welcome to stay online with us. This webinar features presentations from our UN Biodiversity Lab team. Today we have with us Christina Soppels, the UNDP 6NR Project Manager, Annie Verney, UNDP Coordinator for the UN Biodiversity Lab, and Marion Planck, Research Assistant for MAPIX with UN Environment. And we have also Antonio Benvenuti, Data Officer for MAPIX at Great Geneva. This 2-hour webinar will provide the countries in your region with a virtual orientation to the UN Biodiversity Lab. You will learn how the UN Biodiversity Lab can be used to support preparation of a data-driven 6NR. You will receive an overview of how to analyze your country's national and global spatial data to make assessments about progress to achieve several HE biodiversity targets, implement your NBSAP, and achieve expected conservation outcomes. You will also have the opportunity to interact with spatial data experts, 6NR specialists, and the UN Biodiversity Lab web development team. Welcome everyone again. We're thrilled to have you here today. As usual in our session, I would like to remind you all of certain rules and dynamics in the webinar sessions. Microphone will be muted during the presentation. That reduces interferences and facilitates the communication. This 2-hour webinar will be divided into 2 sections. The first will discuss how spatial data can support conservation planning and reporting and provide you with an introduction to the UN Biodiversity Lab. The second section will introduce you to your country's private workspace on the UN Biodiversity Lab and show how this can be used to support your 6NR. Each section of today's webinar will be followed by a 20 to 30-minute question and answer session. Please send us in advance your question or raise your hand in a control panel of GoToWebinar. If you want to speak and the connection allows it, we will open your microphones during the Q&A session. As many of our participants are not necessarily all English native speakers, myself included, I kindly remind our speakers the importance of talking slowly because it fosters the comprehension among our practitioners around the world. The webinar is being entirely recorded and will be posted on the NBSAP Forum YouTube channel. We will also share the recording via email. And last but not least, I will transfer the webinar to our first presenter, Christina Soppels, UNDP 6NR Project Manager, who will provide an introduction to the importance of spatial data for conservation planning and reporting. Over to you, Chrissy.
Thank you so much, Marion, for this introduction, and hi, everyone. It's great to spend the morning with you. I want to start with a brief introduction of the UN Biodiversity Lab and talk about the importance of data for nature and development. We're in a world awash with data. 90% of the data for all of human history was generated within the last 2 years, and the pace of data development continues to grow exponentially. At this time, we have satellite imagery for every corner of the Earth at 3-meter resolution on a daily basis. Despite this, the 4th Industrial Revolution has yet to make a serious mark on the field of biodiversity, and in particular on the intersection of ecosystem services and human development. Last year, our team at UNDP worked with many of you to analyze the maps from every post-2020 NBSAP and FISH National Report, and the findings were startling to us. The average number of maps in the 5th National Reports were fewer than 5, and the NBSAPs each had fewer than 4. This included a map of the country itself, and many times took place after a few rounds of technical review. Roughly a third of the NBSAPs had no maps at all. Furthermore, 80% of the national reports and 70% of the NBSAPs did not have maps that provided the type of information that's needed to guide conservation and development decision-making. Fewer than 4% of all the maps in the NBSAPs and FISH national reports focused on essential ecosystem services, and that only took place for a handful of countries. In December, we surveyed more than 70 GEF eligible countries, and again, many of the people that are working in countries on this call, and the findings confirmed what we suspected from the fifth national reports and NBSAPs. 4 out of every 5 parties that we surveyed identified specific data problems in their country, in their government. And these included silos between agencies, a lack of access to global and regional data sources, and challenges to access and use specialized software, including limited server capacity. We think that these results are not only unfortunate, but dangerous for the future of biodiversity, and here's why. Nature underpins our ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. If we don't know where our natural capital is and what it does for our well-being, communities, and livelihoods, we have little hope of tackling the development and climate challenges of the coming decade. I want to give you 3 examples during this introduction. First, nature is essential to the livelihoods of 80% of the people on our planet. These people live on less than $10 a day. Agriculture sustains 1.3 billion livelihoods, forests sustain another 1.6 billion livelihoods, and oceans another 1.6 billion livelihoods. Therefore, 2 out of every 3 people on this planet directly depend on nature for their livelihoods. We also know from the Global Land Outlook that 1.3 billion people rely on degraded agricultural lands for their livelihoods, and at least 1/5 of all cropland is globally degraded, mostly in developing countries. Therefore, the challenge for us as a conservation and development community is to answer the question, where are the opportunities to tackle poverty through regenerative agriculture and land restoration? For a second example, let's look at how nature is essential to water security. 3 out of every 4 people on the planet depend on forests for their drinking water. Yet we know from a recent WRI report that 2017 was the 2nd worst year for forest loss on record. We also know that 50% of global forest cover has been cleared or degraded. These types of activities raise the risk for the kind of drought we're starting to see in cities around the world with estimates of day 0. On a positive note, a recent study from the Nature Conservancy found that more than 3,200 cities around the world could significantly improve their water security through forest restoration. The challenge for us is to determine where we should focus restorative efforts to improve water security in the face of changing climate. For our third example, let's consider how nature is essential to addressing climate change. First, we know from recent scientific studies that forests represent close to 40% of our climate mitigation solutions. Therefore, we will not be able to come close to achieving our 2% goal, let alone our 1.5-degree goal, without forest. To achieve these goals as conservation managers, we have to be able to answer the question, where exactly are the forests with high carbon stocks? How do they relate to existing forest concessions and forest protected areas? And where should we take specific forest action to have the biggest climate impact? To answer the questions raised in these 3 examples, we need spatial data. We need data on land cover. We need data on protected areas. We need spatial data on carbon stocks, on hydrosedge, and on poverty. To make more informed policy decisions on nature and development, we also need to be able to analyze the results of intersecting multiple data sets. Through our work on the 6th National Report Project, we're finding powerful examples of how GEF-eligible countries are using spatial data to make more informed conservation decisions, to first advance NBSAP implementation, and second, facilitate the delivery of the Aichi biodiversity targets, which are often one and the same. So I want to spend a few minutes in this introduction sharing a few stories of these achievements. First, traveling around the world, let's go to North America. In Mexico, The government is using spatial data to help implement their COP13 decisions on how to mainstream biodiversity into the agricultural sector. Here in Mexico, spatial data are providing key information to align policies on agricultural incentives with the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. These data are helping the government of Mexico to achieve Aichi Biodiversity Target 3. Traveling to the south in Ecuador, the government is using spatial data to tailor the extent and footprint of their protected area system to reflect fragility and biodiversity. These data demonstrate important contributions to Aichi Biodiversity Target 15. Across the Atlantic, the South African government is using spatial data to select potential areas for the official designation of Marine Protected Area. This work is contributing to Aichi Biodiversity Target 6, among other targets. Finally, in Eastern Europe, Moldova is using spatial data to ensure the continued success of the Emerald Network and furthering the capacity of the government there to monitor biodiversity and track changes in biodiversity over time. This work contributes to Aichi Biodiversity Target 11 on protected areas, among other targets. The accomplishments that these parties are making, and many of you are as well, illustrate the powerful role that spatial data can play in supporting the achievement of the Aichi Biodiversity Targets, the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity through 2020, and the 2050 Vision. In each of these cases, spatial data provided key quantitative analyses to assess the status of NBSAP implementation and biodiversity status and trends information. However, through UNDP and UN Environment's work with over 140 countries to prepare the NBSAPs and 6 national reports, we've come to recognize that parties' capacity to access and use spatial data is highly variable. Therefore, we've created the UN Biodiversity Lab based on your feedback to enable all parties to the CBD to have access to high-quality global spatial data and analysis tools, regardless of their internal GIS capacity or their access to data. We see the UN Biodiversity Lab as a key tool to help you produce a high-quality, data-driven 6 national report by the end of 2018. This is really important because the 6 scenarios must be completed by the end of 2018, and they must be data-driven because these data are going to be used for several things. First, we're using them to determine the progress we're all making as a global community to achieve the Aichi Biodiversity targets by 2020. The data are going to improve decision-making related to NBSAP implementation. They're going to provide a baseline for the current state of biodiversity around the world. They're going to be used to inform the 5th Global Biodiversity Outlook. And last, data from the 6 national reports are going to guide discussions on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Accurate data, which geospatial analyses facilitate, are critical to achieving these goals. Through this project, as you're aware, UNDP and UN Environment are engaging directly with each of you, a total of 140 governments, to prepare their 6 national reports. These interactions are allowing us to develop and update the spatial planning portal based on your actual user needs. The platform is managed through a committed partnership between UNDP, UN Environment, with support from the CBD Secretariat and funding from the GEF. Our technical partners are MapX, Grid Geneva, NASA, and UN Environment WCMC, and they also bring important expertise. We see this project as an important opportunity to build partnerships among data providers and data users. Working with you is helping us ensure that governments have access and capacity to the types of cutting-edge spatial data that they need to make important conservation and development decisions. I just wanted to close this introduction by saying that I'm so glad that you've joined us for the regional webinar today. This webinar is part of the UN Biodiversity Lab training package, and we're offering several technical webinars. It's a part of the 6 in our technical webinar series. We'll have 3 in-depth technical trainings this September. And when you registered for any part of the 6 in our technical webinar series, you're automatically registered for every webinar and you'll receive emails reminding you. On September 13th, we're going to show you how to upload and work with national datasets in the MapX platform. On September 18th, we're going to show you how to use spatial data and maps to make conservation decisions. And finally, on October 2nd, will show you how to use story maps to communicate the value of biodiversity. With this, I conclude my presentation, and the floor is back to you, Marion.
Thank you, Chrissy, for that insightful presentation. And in order to learn more about the data functionalities and services offered by the UN Biodiversity Lab, I'd now like to present my colleague, Annie Verney, UNDP coordinator for the UN Biodiversity Lab. Annie, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Marion, and thanks to Chrissy for that opening presentation. Welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning, and we're really glad to have you here today. So I'm excited to provide you all with an introduction to the UN Biodiversity Lab, the data we have available through the platform, and the types of analyses that you can run to support the preparation of your 6NR and the implementation of your MBSAP. In the first half of this presentation, I'll provide you with an overview of 10 key features of the UN Biodiversity Lab that we think are particularly important to support you as you work on your 6NR project. In the second half, I'll dive into the specific global data sets we have available through the platform and the analyses that you can conduct. So let me get started. So the mission of the UN Biodiversity Lab is threefold. First, we want to work with you to build spatial literacy to enable better decision making. Second, to use spatial data as a vehicle for improved transparency and accountability. And third, to apply insights from spatial data across sectors to deliver on the Aichi biodiversity targets and on the nature-based sustainable development goals. So in order to do this, there are 10 key features of the UN Biodiversity Lab we'd like to highlight here today. So the first feature that I want to emphasize is that UN Biodiversity Lab is a free, open source platform that does not require GIS expertise. In our outreach to the 6NR project, we heard from many of you that you don't have the capacity to conduct GIS analyses in your country. On the other hand, we heard from other countries that you do have GIS capacity, but lack the access to server space you need to analyze your data. We created the UN Biodiversity Lab to address both these issues. I also want to highlight that the platform is cloud-based and low bandwidth, meaning that it can be used in a range of internet connectivity conditions, which we know is important to many of the countries we work with on the 6NR project. The second feature that I want to highlight is that UN Biodiversity Lab provides a one-stop shop for policymakers to access the best available data on biodiversity, protected areas, threats to biodiversity, and the sustainable development goals. We currently have nearly 80 global data layers from over 40 providers that were identified by our spatial data experts as the most essential data to support your 6NR and MBSAP implementation. I'll explain a little bit more about what these data layers are and how you can access them in the second half of this presentation. One key thing to emphasize now is that all of the data on the site were carefully curated by our spatial data specialists to enable you to access key data sets by theme or by Aichi biodiversity target. So essentially what we did here is that each data set was assigned one or more themes based on its general area of relevance. So for example, the ecoregions data layer is assigned within the biodiversity theme. The above ground carbon biomass falls within the climate change and carbon theme, and marine wilderness naturally falls within the marine theme. Similarly, each dataset was assigned one or more Aichi biodiversity targets based either on its status as an official indicator for that ABT or our spatial data experts' analysis of layers that could be useful for reporting on a given ABT. In general, we suggest searching for data by ABT as a good starting point for the 6NR project. And my colleague Marion will show you a little bit more about how to do this in the second half of the webinar. So the fourth feature that I'd like to emphasize is that for each of the data layers available on UN Biodiversity Lab, we provide UN verification of data integrity. So basically this means that all data layers included on the UN Biodiversity Lab have been assessed using a dedicated data integrity assessment framework. This scores the data reliability, the technical accessibility of the data, data openness, and data sustainability. Based on these criteria, each data layer receives a ranking between 0 and 100, which can be viewed in the metadata of each data set. Before any data is made publicly accessible in the UN verified data catalog on our homepage, it's reviewed by our team of experts at UN Environment and UNDP. This ensures that all data in the data catalog has received the UN seal of approval. All right, so number 5. This is one of the features that we're most excited about. So essentially, we've created a secure and private online workspace for each GEF eligible country working through the 6NR project. So on the UN Biodiversity Lab, you'll see this private workspace referred to as your national project. The national project is a secure and private online space that's pre-populated with key peer-reviewed data layers that can support the preparation of your 6NR. I want to emphasize that we recognize that many countries may have better data available that you prefer to use for your analyses. To facilitate the use of national data, we provide unlimited server space for you to upload your national level spatial data sets. So this could include data sets on population, cadastre data, or agricultural data, among others. For those who do want to access the global data sets on UN Biodiversity Lab, we recognize that many of you are required by your governments to use only official national data for your 6NR and NBSAPs. If you would like to use the data we have on UN Biodiversity Lab, but need to assure that it is nationally verified, we can work with you on this. Please contact the help email that's listed on the screen, support@unbiodiversity.org, and we can provide a customized letter co-signed by UNDP and UN Environment to the contacts within the relevant ministry in your country. So 2 key features of your national project are first, that it provides you with this unlimited storage space for your national data, and second, with the highest level of privacy assurances possible. So we ensure the privacy of your data in 2 ways. First, server security, and second, password protected national products, or national projects. So all the data you upload to the site are stored on our secure servers, which are located in Switzerland. Switzerland has the highest standards in the world for data security, ensuring you against any undesired access to your data server side. At the same time, your national project space is protected through the UN Biodiversity Lab by restricting access to a specific group of users. Only these users will be able to see the data you upload. Access to the national project for your country is regulated by an administrator, and for the 6NR project, each UNDP or UN Environment 6NR national focal point has been added as the administrator for your country's national project. Administrators will be able to control who has access to the project, invite new users, and conduct key analyses to generate maps for inclusion in the 6NR. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to access and customize your country's national project in the second half of this webinar. The next feature I'd like to highlight is that you can use the UN Biodiversity Lab to conduct key analyses for your national report in under 10 minutes. The UN Biodiversity Lab can be used to generate 2 types of analyses. First, the status of biodiversity in your country, and second, analyses that identify actions that can be taken to enhance NBSAP implementation and future conservation planning. We'll be hosting in-depth webinars on these types of analyses on September 13th and September 18th. So once you've completed analyses, you can export maps, data layers, and data sets for the 6th National Report and related analyses at the click of a button. You can see the supported export formats on this slide, which includes several file formats to enable analysis with desktop GIS, as well as PDF exports for maps that can be directly added to your 6NR. All right, feature number 9. So you can also use the UN Biodiversity Lab to communicate best practices and conservation successes using story maps. We have several story maps already posted on the site showing examples of the use of data in various countries, and the presentation I'm giving today is also completed using the story map template. Story maps bring data to life and enable countries to communicate to others in high quality, visually appealing ways. So these can be shared on social media, embedded on websites, and even turned into automated videos to, for instance, help get stakeholder funding for future projects and encourage knowledge sharing within your ministry and with high-level politicians in your country. We'll offer a webinar specifically on creating story maps to communicate the value of biodiversity on September 25th. So finally, I want to highlight that the UN Biodiversity Lab is a co-designed space that will be refined based on feedback and requests from the users. The current version of the site is a beta version, and we expect to go through several iterations as we work to include your feedback and to develop new features of the site that better meet your needs. We really want to hear from all of you as you begin to access the platform and use it to understand what's not working and what could support you better. So please do reach out to us through the support email on the screen or through the contact form on the website. Users who are proficient in informatics can also submit a pull request on GitHub. However, for general inquiries, we suggest sending an email to our support team, who can then post it to GitHub if necessary. All right, so with this, I want to move on to give you a tour of some of the key data layers we offer and the analyses you can conduct for your 6NR and for your MBSAP implementation. So let's start out by diving into the data we have on UN Biodiversity Lab. We currently have nearly 80 data layers, and we're continually adding new data to the site. Please do contact us if you have data yourself or you're aware of data that we should include in the platform through the forms on the website and the contact email address. We select data for inclusion through a rigorous process involving input and insight from conservationists and scientists around the world. All data on UN Biodiversity Lab comes from partners who have provided data after it has gone through a rigorous scientific review and publication in some of the world's most high-impact scientific journals. So our data has been published in Science, Nature, and PNAS, among other journals. As we'd be here all day if we tried to go through all 80 data layers, today I want to show you some of the most pertinent data for the 6NR process. So we'll cover data from 4 broad categories: the protected area state, biodiversity, threats to biodiversity, and SDG data. So let's start out with data on the global protected area state. The World Database on Protected Areas is the largest database of protected areas on the planet. The data they include are the legally defined protected area borders as reported to them by governments for both marine and terrestrial areas. We pull in protected area data directly from WCMC in Cambridge, so the data is constantly updated to reflect the monthly updates to the WDPA. We also have data from an analysis recently published in the journal Science that provides an estimate of the management effectiveness of protected areas globally. Here, this data represents the percentage of a protected area that is under intense human pressure, with human pressure being derived from the human footprint. We also have data published in 2017 by scientists at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission that analyzed how well connected the protected area state is within ecoregions globally. For those of you familiar with this data, you may know it as the Protected Connected Data Set. This is the data directly related to ABT 11. So let's move on to a few of our key biodiversity layers, both marine and terrestrial. We of course include the terrestrial ecoregions of the world. This data that's in our site, it was produced in 2017 and is one of the key data sets that is directly referred to in specific ABT protection commitments. We also include the IUCN Red List species range polygons. Among these are several other derived products that include species richness, seen in the slide here, threatened species richness, and metrics of range rarity. In the marine realm, we have data on globally defined marine wilderness that was just published several weeks ago and received large media attention, with even The Economist picking it up. Wilderness is increasingly being recognized by scientists in the broader conservation community as a conservation target that deserves more attention, as we can see through the press around this paper. In the marine space, we also have data on species richness, range rarity, and proportional range rarity that has been extracted from AquaMaps, a tool used to generate large-scale predictions of the natural occurrences of marine species. So for example, the map on the right of this slide is derived from about 25,000 different species. All right, so let me provide a brief snapshot of the data we have available on threats to biodiversity. So first, we have the Biodiversity Intactness Index. The Biodiversity Intactness Index shows the modeled average abundance of originally present species relative to their abundance in an intact ecosystem. It can be seen as a measure of how much humans have impacted on terrestrial biodiversity, or as a measure of how degraded biodiversity in a given area is. We also have data on cumulative human impact on terrestrial ecosystems, the human footprint, along with change maps of the human footprint from 1993 through 2009. An updated version through to 2013 will be available in the near future. In the marine realm, we have data on the cumulative change of human impacts, including shipping pollution, runoff plumes, and other related data. So finally, let's talk about what we're calling the SDG data on UN Biodiversity Lab. These data can not only support your commitments to the CBD, but can also show the connections between the CBD and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. A key component of this SDG data is socioeconomic data. There are many socioeconomic data layers ranging from human population, predictions of urban expansion, livestock densities, agricultural suitability and change, and, shown here, access to cities in 2015. This data set is an interesting one because it was created to map human access to healthcare and can help identify at-risk populations. At the same time, it also has uses for mapping risk to resources, for example, where easy access to protected areas might have impacts on management effectiveness. Also important for drawing connections to SDGs are assessments of ecosystem services, such as carbon storage and sequestration. We include on UN Biodiversity Lab several recently available data sets on carbon, including above ground carbon above ground forest biomass, which is what's shown on this slide, as well as soil carbon and changes in carbon biomass. So I want to emphasize that all of the data sets that I've shown here are only a sample of those available on UN Biodiversity Lab. We're happy to walk you through the other data sets and to show you how they can be used for your 6NR and for your MVSAP implementation. Access to these data is only the first step. It's how we use these global data sets that are important. So the UN Biodiversity Lab was created to support you to use these data sets to complete the analyses needed to visualize and understand national progress to report on 5 Aichi biodiversity targets for which spatial data is available and essential. These include Aichi Biodiversity Target 5 on reducing rates of habitat loss, Aichi Biodiversity Target 11 on meeting protected area coverage, ABT 12 on preventing the extinction of threatened species, ABT 14 on safeguarding and restoring essential ecosystem services, and ABT 15 on enhancing and restoring climate resilience. You can use the UN Biodiversity Lab to create status maps to demonstrate your party's progress on these 5 ABTs for your 6NR, as well as to produce maps that can help to inform decisions and actions to be taken in your MVSAP implementation and your future conservation planning efforts. So this slide here is a little bit overwhelming, but this is a list of key maps that UN Biodiversity Lab can assist you in helping to make informed conservation decisions. We'll show you how to create many of these maps in the technical webinars on the 13th and 18th of September. But for now, I'll show you examples of just 5. Many of these examples can be produced in under 10 minutes on the platform and can be applied to MVSAP strategies and actions around the world. A few of these are slightly more complicated and require some external GIS skills, but we're here to assist you and can provide support all along the way. So the examples that I'm about to show are examples developed internally by our team using the UN Biodiversity Lab and are for exploratory purposes only. For any country, we can help you to evaluate your MVSAP and create maps that track your progress, similar to those I'm about to show now. Okay, so let's start with ABT 5. This first map shows how UN Biodiversity Lab can help you to visualize the progress you're making to achieve ABT 5. We looked at Eritrea's MVSAP and found that it had an action related to identifying and prioritizing critically threatened habitats. We can assess progress to achieve this MVSAP action by looking at efforts to protect the habitats of critically threatened species, such as the wild African donkey. In this analysis, we overlaid maps of protected areas, which you can see in purple, with the species range map for the donkey in red. We learned that approximately 14% of the species range for the donkey in Eritrea is protected. The northern portion of the range at the top of the screen is well protected, but the southern portion is not. You can include these data and maps in your national report, and also to develop more specific measures to protect species during MVSAP implementation. You can use similar approaches to that we used here to help identify and prioritize critical habitats for a set of endangered species anywhere around the globe. The second map that I'm showing here shows you how UN Biodiversity Lab can help you to visualize progress to achieve ABT 11 on protected areas. So Afghanistan has MVSAP actions related to finalizing a protected area system for the country that ensures it protects areas of high biodiversity in all major ecoregions and includes transboundary areas. We can assess progress on this NBSAP action by overlapping the ecoregions and the protected area layers for Afghanistan, which you can see here on the slide. From this analysis, we calculated that only one of Afghanistan's ecoregions has more than 17% protected coverage. At the other extreme, 7 out of 16 ecoregions have less than 1% protected. Using this type of information, again, anywhere around the globe, you could then work with a team to design strategies for underrepresented ecoregions in a protected areas network. Our third map shows how you can visualize progress towards ABT 12 on preventing extinctions and preserving species. Timor-Leste has NBSAP actions related to identifying and developing protection plans for endangered species in all ecosystems, including forests, mountains, wetlands, marine areas, and agricultural lands. So we can use the UN Biodiversity Lab to assess progress on this action by looking at the protected area coverage for the habitats of several threatened species. From this analysis, we concluded that 46% of Timor-Leste's mangroves occur within a protected area. 51% of the country's coral reefs are also protected by MPAs. Anywhere around the world, you can use this type of information to prioritize areas where conservation interventions to protect habitat can help reduce the risk of extinction for the species that depend on that habitat for their survival. Our fourth map shows how we can visualize progress towards ABT 14 on ecosystem services. Here we looked at Tanzania's NBSAP, which has actions related to developing, strengthening, and implementing water management programs. Using the UN Biodiversity Lab, we first identified key watersheds, second, identified supply areas, and third, forest cover change in the surrounding area. We can use these type of data to prioritize areas for protection and restoration purposes to help maintain this valuable ecosystem service. Finally, our last map shows how the UN Biodiversity Lab can help you to visualize the progress you're making to achieve ABT 15 on climate resilience. The Dominican Republic has NBSAP actions related to collecting and analyzing data on the contributions of carbon sequestration programs to climate resilience. It also has actions on mapping the key ecosystems that have potential for carbon sequestration. Using the UN Biodiversity Lab, we conducted an analysis that shows the tons of carbon per hectare within the country's protected areas. You can use this type of data to highlight the value of protected areas beyond biodiversity conservation, and also to select complementary protected areas that contribute to mitigation strategies. So as we've seen here, there are many different examples of how analyses in the UN Biodiversity Lab can help to inform NBSAP implementation, achievement of the Aichi biodiversity targets, and the development of your 6NR. Our team at UNDP, UN Environment, and CBD are here to support you to use this tool to create a high-quality, data-driven 6NR. Our spatial data and 6NR technical specialists speak English, French, and Spanish, and can give you a tour of the UN Biodiversity Lab. They can help you to identify key maps and analyses that can be produced for your country, and they can show you how to upload existing national level spatial data to the platform. In September through December of this year, we'll be offering additional webinars to train you on the use of this tool, one-on-one technical support with with our spatial data specialist and 6NR specialists, and online working groups through the NBSAP forum to help you complete these analyses for your 6NR. In all of these venues, you can ask us experts any questions you have, and you can also learn from your peers. So before we move into the first question and answer session of this webinar, I'd like to take the chance to introduce you as the UN Biodiversity Lab users to your key focal points as you begin to access the platform. For any technical issues related to UN Biodiversity Lab, you can write to the email address shown on the screen. We'll do the best we can to answer your questions within 24 hours. For support with spatial data and analyses, you can contact our spatial planner, Scott Atkinson, at the email address listed here. And finally, for support related to the 6NR, the focal points for UNDP and UN environment countries are listed on the slide. The UN Biodiversity Lab can help your country and the global community to create a baseline against which we can measure progress. If we don't know where we are now, it's very hard to measure successes and to identify areas for improvement. We look forward to working with you to explore how the UN Biodiversity Lab can support your 6NR and your future conservation planning. So thanks very much, and I will hand it back over to Marion.
Many thanks, Annie, and also many thanks to Chrissy before for your presentations on the importance of spatial data for nature and development and on the UN Biodiversity Lab. Both of them provided a great overview of why the UN Biodiversity Lab was created and how it can help policymakers to plan and report for conservation and sustainable development. Now, I would like to invite our webinar attendees to share their questions and comments. You can use the question box or press raise your hand to participate to the Q&A session. Please use the control panel of the GoToWebinar platform to do so. We can open your microphone or read your question depending on your preference. I do strongly encourage you to ask your questions now. We can all learn from each other. Asking questions to initiate the discussions is one step forward towards it. So I'm actually waiting for your questions. Is there any participant that would like to ask anything regarding those two presentations? Or maybe you could also share your national experience on using spatial data, either with the UN Biodiversity Lab tool or your own data sets. So I have a question from Jason Williams, who's asking, after the completion of the 6NR, will countries still have access to the workspaces to use as dissemination tool for stakeholders? I guess, Annie, you can answer that.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. So definitely, we'll continue to keep these national projects open. It's our hope that you'll not only use them for the 6NR process, but also to support your NBSAP implementation moving forward, particularly as we transition into the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and future conservation planning and decision-making needs. So your administrator for your national project will remain the same or can be switched over to somebody more permanent, and you'll be able to continue to access the space to conduct analyses.
Thank you,
Does that
Annie.
answer the question?
Yes, I think it does answer the question, and we can add that we really want to have spatial data on the agenda, for the post-2020 strategy actually on biodiversity, and so we understand that we're initiating the movement here, but we're really hoping in the next few months to get your feedback, improve this tool to make it absolutely responsive to the needs of the countries, and move forward with it with a more systematic use of the data. So thanks, Jason, for your question. I have Mustafa who's asking if he can have a copy of this presentation. Of course, we'll be sharing the presentations on the NBSAP forum that you may have used in the past, and if no, I encourage you to do so. We will also release the recording of this session on YouTube, the YouTube channel of the NBSAP forum, and we'll also share it via email as we shared the date for this webinar. Thank you for your question. So far, I do not see any other question, nor any. I have a hand raised from James. Hi, James. I'm going to open your microphone. Good to have you there. Can you hear us?
I can indeed. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you very much for two very interesting presentations. A follow-on to some of this, as watching the presentations, I was struck by the amount to which this is relevant beyond the Six National Report process. And it was really a query to the extent to which you might be offering a help desk or a side event or something similar at the upcoming Conference of Parties, in order perhaps to engage more with the national focal points or policymakers who in some ways are the key people to be making those decisions about how those spatial data can be used and the inference that one draws from the examples you've given, for example, of overlapping protected areas with endangered species or at-risk habitats, because it is those decisions that actually will make a bigger difference in terms of where do we go from here than perhaps those who are focused on the production of the Sixth National Report. So I'm very pleased to hear that you're aiming to try and keep this going beyond the Sixth National Report, but I think that there is a broader audience for this, not just a technical audience, that perhaps should be being engaged. And I'd just like your thoughts about that, please.
Thanks for the question, James. And actually, I will turn over to Chrissy for this one, especially for the upcoming COP. Chrissy, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, hi everyone. We're actually working on an agenda for a technical workshop at the upcoming COP. For those of you who have attended SBSTA, we've hosted one-day technical workshops at each of the SBSTAs. This will take place the weekend of the 23rd of November. It'll be that Friday, and we'll be focused on helping countries share their experiences around Sixth National Report preparation. We'll be reviewing how spatial data can be used to assess progress, implement NBSAP, achieve the biodiversity targets, and analyze changes in biodiversity status and trends. We will do that in, I think, a 3-hour group discussion. So we won't get through everything, but that's the space that we have. We'll have the whole day, but 3 hours will focus on spatial. We'll have some dialogue around technical review in the afternoon, and I think spatial will come up in that, and we'll try to focus on, where you can insert spatial data into your 6th NR to enhance it further. Beyond that, we have a technical help desk that will be available throughout at least the first week of COP. We also did this at SBSTA with great success, and at that time, you can come up and talk to our spatial ecologist, Scott, get all of your questions answered. You can work with him on the lab. We're also offering one-on-one support between now and COP with our team and Scott. We're last developing a roster of spatial data analysts because our one spatial ecologist, Scott, can't do everything. So we will have the roster available for UNDP and UN environmental countries to use when they want additional support. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, that's very helpful, and I think that's a good support to be drawing upon. One other question, if I may, please, which is the relationship between temporal data and the spatial data that you've got there, because one of the things that we've done within the United Kingdom, for example, and hello to colleagues, I apologize, I'm coming in on a seminar that's focused elsewhere in the world, but I'm afraid the timing worked for me, so thank you for allowing me to join in. One of the things we've tried to do with biodiversity indicators is to have a temporal aspect to them. Some of that's actually about analysis of spatial data, and then what area have we got, for example, under agri-environment schemes, or what area is subject to eutrophication, acidification against critical loads. And the extent to which the lab allows that sort of temporal analysis would also be interesting to know about, please.
Who could we turn on for this question? Annie or Antonio, maybe?
Sure. This is Annie. I can jump in quickly, and then I saw that our colleague Marion Blanc with MapX also had a response. So that's one of the areas we're really interested to move towards in future iterations of the platform, looking more at real-time monitoring as well as scenario planning capabilities to really be able to assess if you take an action in a given area, what the implications of that will be. For now, I know that we do have several data sets that are streamed in live from their providers, which Mariam can provide a little bit more information on. But some of these data sets, you're right, they were produced at a specific time and would need to be updated.
Thank you, Annie, for the answer. If I can just jump in and maybe complete this answer. So indeed, as Annie was saying, we are very interested in working with also temporal data to be able to monitor progress through time. Currently, in the UN Biodiversity Lab, we do have some of the time series data. I'm especially watching right now some human impact data that have been measured between, for example, the 90s and to the 2010s, etc. So I would say it really depends on the availability of the data. But as Annie was saying, we are very keen on working more and more with these temporal aspects of the data.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies. And James, I hope that answers your question.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. I'm moving on to another question that we received from Darshini, who's asking, well, who's first thanking us for the presentation, especially, well, Chrissy and Annie, of course, as it was very informative and quite interesting. And reading forward the question, I'm quoting, "We're very grateful for the use of the UN Biodiversity Lab since, as you mentioned, data and access to satellite imagery, server space, etc. is a usual constraint. I don't have a question presently, but I just wanted to give my appreciation of the work done by the UN. Thank you." So I'm not sure, Dashrini, where you are from, but thank you for this very nice comment. And I'm glad we're actually targeting and responding to the needs of the countries. Maybe my colleagues wants to add something here. Or not. And in this case, just thank you. We really appreciate the feedback. And I see your question now. You're from Guyana. So I'm glad it's helping you now for the 6NR, hopefully, and then in the future as well. I currently do not see any raised hand or any question. I'm going to give you maybe 30 more seconds to add your question before we move on to the second presentation. One more time, it's a chance to exchange maybe with our experts today and save time. No, still no. Oh well. So maybe we can just move forward with the next presentation that is going to be a bit more technical. And in the meantime, you feel free to share your questions with me. But we'll have another Q&A session after the last presentation, and I'll be happy to take your questions. So turning over to Marion now. We're going to introduce a bit more the national projects within the UN Biodiversity Lab and show you how you can customize those projects to support the development of your 6NR. So Marion, if you're ready, then over to you.
Hi, everyone. In this final presentation, I will provide you with an introduction to how to access your national project on the UN Biodiversity Lab, how to control access, and how to perform basic functions. So this introduction will be presented as a series of GIF, which is animated images, as all of which will be available for download as a PowerPoint presentation after the webinar. So let's start out with the basics of registering and logging into the UN Biodiversity Lab. So you can see right now on the screen the slide of the homepage for the UN Biodiversity Lab, which is accessible at www.unbiodiversitylab.org. Please note that when accessing the site with a Mac computer or devices running iOS, you may experience some bugs with Chrome or Firefox browsers, so we recommend using Safari on Mac computers while we work on fixing this. For the Windows, there is no preferred browser. The only requirement is that HTML5 is supported by the browser. Any version of modern browsers, including Microsoft Edge or Chrome and Firefox, will work as well. So to register or to log in the UN Biodiversity Lab, you just click on this button that you see and you enter your email. If you're an administrator, you must enter your email address that you have associated with your project. Then you will receive a one-time use code via email. To keep your information secure, you will always log in to the UN Biodiversity Lab using this randomly generated one-time code. You should receive an email straight away from the map export. And if you don't receive it within a few minutes, you just have to check your spam folder of your email. So just enter this code into the website and you're officially logged in. Each time you will enter the platform, you'll click the icon to see if you are still logged in to your user account. But sometimes you may need to re-enter your email and generate a unique login. So be sure you always provide the same email in order to access your projects, because this is the email you will be registered with. So now that you know how to log in, let's learn how to access your private national workspace or project on the UN Biodiversity Lab. So first navigate to the My Project button in the UN Biodiversity Lab that you see. And when you click on the My Project tab, you will be directed to a list of projects within the UN Biodiversity Lab. Any projects you're a member of will show up at the top of this list. If you are not associated with the 6NR, you can still use several functions of the Biodiversity Lab, including downloading source data or generating maps. So please note that at this time, we are only offering the national project feature to teams associated with the 6NR reporting. If you are working on the 6NR, we've already created a national project for you that is pre-populated with relevant data layers. For ease, the UNDP or UN Environment 6NR focal point for each country has automatically been designated as the 6NR National Project Administrator. If you're the UNDP or UN Environment 6NR focal point for your country and have not gotten access to your national project, please contact us after the webinar. And if you are working on your country's 6NR, but if you are not the focal point, you can easily join your national project. You can search through projects by typing the name of a country and request to join. This will send an email to the administrator of the project. And so it's the reason why it's important to consider who on your team should be the project administrator, because that person will have privileges on the project. Every national project needs to have one site administrator. The administrator will maintain access rights to the project and will be responsible for both providing access to the other users and delegating the role of those users in the project. The administrator should preferably have some basic working knowledge and understanding of geographical information system, software, and spatial data, which is called GIS. They do not, however, need to be GIS experts by any means. It's just better if they have some basic working knowledge. As noted previously, for the 6NR project, the UNDP UN Environment 6NR focal points have been designated as the administrator for each country's project. If the 6NR is not the best person to be the administrator of your project, don't worry. We can easily add another member of your team to be administrator as well. So if you need help identifying the best administrator of your project, feel free to contact us at support@unbiodiversitylab.org after this webinar for more advice. Concerning the roles and responsibilities of the administrator will be the manager of the project. Only the administrator can decide who is given access to the project and what those users can do within the project. For example, some users may be only allowed to view data, while other users may be allowed to upload data and do analysis. The administrator alone can decide to invite external users to the project if necessary, or to remove them from the project. Aside from providing the user access rights, the administrator is also in charge of configuring the project. They can modify parameters such as the abstract, the map position, etc. And they can also delete the project completely. To configure the project, navigate to the project configuration in the toolbox button that you see right now, and just go navigate through the menu. Here, you can set the description and initial position of the map of your project. Please be sure that you do not change your project title, as it's very essential that it remains the same to ensure that you can easily access it within the UN Biodiversity Lab. At the bottom of this window, there's a checkbox that you can see, which denotes whether your project will be public or not. If your project is public, it can be searched in the list of projects, and other users can ask to become member of it. If you want your project to remain private, please leave this box unchecked. However, remember that within a public project, you can publish data that will only be visible to the members of the project unless you specifically state that the data can be read by public users. To invite people to collaborate in your project, just select the Invite a New Member button. Enter the emails of people you would like to extend an invitation to, and they will receive a link immediately. As people can ask to become members of a project, the administrator can also receive requests of membership by email. So please check if the person can be granted access to your project, and if so, accept his request by clicking on the link in the email that you've received. If you receive an invite to a project, the link will automatically direct to MapX. So to access your project within the UN Biodiversity Lab, you can simply navigate back to My Project link on the platform. Earlier, I was mentioning that users can have different roles inside the project. You can define the roles of each user member on Define Roles. Only the administrator can define the role of other members, and members will include everyone in your project that can see and use the data. Members with publisher privileges can publish source layers and views for all members, and can also edit views that are available for publisher privileges. Administrators have the same authority as a publisher and can also change the status of other accounts and delete the project entirely. If you're interested in contributing data to be published for use in the lab, we would really love to hear from you. So please follow the link on our FAQ to submit our data submission form, or contact us directly at the email address support@unbiodiversitylab.org. So congratulations, now you know the basics of managing a project on the UN Biodiversity Lab. Once you have your project, you will want to know maybe a little more about the types of data you can add and the tools you can access. So let's start out by discussing the types of data available on the UN Biodiversity Lab. The UN Biodiversity Lab handles two types of spatial data, vector data and raster data. You can broadly think of vector data as data that represent linear or area features on a map, such as highways, which are lines, cities, which are points, or species range maps, which are just polygons. Vector data will normally contain not just one feature on a map, but also have other data associated with, called attribute data. Attribute can be many things. It can be a place name, it can be the area of a feature, or any other calculated or derived data that is associated with the feature. For example, for each feature in the Ecoregion 2017 dataset, there's an attribute that for that feature's ecoregion, a finer scale land classification, as well as its biome, a more generalized land classification. For raster data is broadly thought of as data that represents things that exist on a range of values across space. It can be maps of temperature, for example, or land cover, or population density, or the percent of canopy closure in a forest. The attribute of raster data is a value within a pixel or in a grid cell, and can represent categorical values, such as land cover classification, or continuous values such as elevation. Within the UN Biodiversity Lab, users are able to make maps using both types of data, but however, at present, users can only carry out analysis and query data by attribute on vector data types only within the lab. For now, what you need to know is that raster data have purple buttons and vector data have gray buttons, as you can see on the screen. The red button indicates that the dataset is being accessed in the UN Biodiversity Lab from another external web-hosted spatial database, such as the World Database on Protected Areas. So let's now explore key tools and functions available on the UN Biodiversity Lab. The datasets are organized thematically in the UN Biodiversity Lab on two ways. First, by relevance to reporting on an IKEA biodiversity target, and second, by general theme on the dataset. The general themes available include biodiversity, climate and carbon, ecosystem services, human impact, land cover, marine, natural hazards, protected areas, restoration, and socio-economic. For the IKEA biodiversity target, it includes ABTs 5, 11, 12, 14, and 15. So for the moment, we have assigned themes to each dataset based on our best judgment on their primary theme among the UN Biodiversity Lab themes mentioned above, both generally and within the context of reporting on ABTs. But you may indeed find that dataset may help you in reporting in different ways that we have tagged them. And in fact, it's really our hope that you will find novel uses for the data that can really assist you in your national reporting. So we really encourage you to look beyond just the ABT themes when searching datasets, but also to explore other thematics areas as well. So to activate a dataset, just turn on a particular theme or target of your choice by clicking on the associated switch in the left panel. You will then see a list of views that are related to that theme or target. Click the button beside it to activate the view. To view the map in full screen, you may experiment with clicking these buttons, as you can see right now on the screen. There are several methods to filter your views or search for a particular dataset. You can order the selected views by title or by date, also by searching by keyword. Clicking the Filter Activated Views button will remove all the views except from the list, except for the ones that you've selected, as you saw. You can click also down here to filter views by component, meaning by the type of view, by classes, meaning by keywords, or by collections, which are the themes and other tags according to which each view is associated with. To look at views in a certain order, you can also use these arrows in the View toolbar, located beneath the legend in each view. Just click on Filter Activated Views for simplicity, so that only the views we have currently selected are available in the legend. And the arrows will move each view up and down according to your selection. To conduct analysis within your project, you will first need to add data. For the 6 announced national project, we've already done this for you. So your workspace already contains up to 50 different datasets, including the World Protected Dataset on protected areas, the human footprint, the IUCN Red List species, range data, various datasets on carbon, global forest data, Alliance for Zero Extinction Sites, ecoregions, and various socio-economic data, among others. Although please note that not all data may be pre-populated in your country, as not all data covers all countries. For example, the mangrove data does not occur in Kyrgyzstan. And here you can see an example with the project of Afghanistan pre-populated with multiple data. To delete unnecessary external views from your project, you can just navigate back to the toolbox. There are several items in here which will be covered further in detail in the webinar on September 13 on uploading and working with national datasets. Today, I just want to show you how to review views that you do not want in your project. So just click on Manage External Views, find the title of the view you would like to remove, and click on the small X, and this will remove it from your workspace. But if you accidentally delete an external views that you would like to see in your workspace, you can easily re-add it by finding in the view in the main data catalog and clicking the share button beneath the view. Just enter the name of your project here, and it should automatically appear underneath the input. When you click on Add the view to selected project, a save icon will appear, and it signifies that it's now available in your project. So in addition to adding data to your project, you can also share certain views and collections with colleagues. The collections refer to predefined themes that the view is part of. For example, each biodiversity target has a theme that you can select. You can also choose to either generate a direct link or to embed the view or collection in a website or a blog if necessary. Note that if you're trying to share a view from a private project to someone who has not been added as a member of your project, it will not be visible. Concerning downloading spatial data, you can also download data that were published in vector format from the UN Biodiversity Lab for use in desktop GIS programs. You can download data in several different formats for use in your own programs, including Esri shapefile, GeoPackage, GeoJSON, and KML. You can choose to clip this data to certain country as well, and it will automatically select all the features contained or touching the borders of the country of your choice. As for now, in order to really clip the data by the country borders and to delete everything outside it, the users will have to do this outside MapX in a separate GIS software. Please note that not all the views are available for download because some of them are protected under a view-only license, and also only the vector data can currently be downloaded. Raster data will soon be available for download too. You will receive also an email with a link to your data once the download process has finished. And finally, note that you cannot download any data if you're not logged in the UN Biodiversity Lab. The final element I would like to introduce today is how to generate and download a map from the UN Biodiversity Lab, and this is maybe the most important aspect of the UN Biodiversity Lab for you. Making maps is a critical element of using the UN Biodiversity Lab, and it can be done in two ways. So first, clicking this Take a Screenshot button will automatically begin a download of zip file to your computer. The zip file will contain 4 elements. There are 3 PNGs with the scale, the map, and the legend, and there's 1 PDF with all the elements combined. If you cannot see the file at the bottom of your browser, just check the download folder of your computer. Concerning the PDF document, the PDF output will look like this. The visual elements are still in development, so if the output is not of your liking, we recommend arranging the elements yourself. To do so, you can use a program such as PowerPoint to arrange easily the elements for inclusion into reports or publication, as you can see right now on the screen. If you would simply like to take a screenshot of the view with no auxiliary information, you can just click the print button along the top toolbar. You will automatically download a picture of just what is shown on the screen. So today I've provided you with a brief overview to get you started on the UN Biodiversity Lab, but there's much more to learn about this platform. So be sure to join for our webinars in September on uploading and analyzing national data for your 6NR, using spatial data and maps to make conservation decisions, and using star maps to communicate the value of the biodiversity. Thank you very much, and over to you, Marion.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you very much for your presentation and for providing a really concrete picture of how parties can begin to use the UN Biodiversity Lab for preparing their 6NR. And now I would like to invite the webinar's attendee for the second Q&A session. Last chance for you, at least for now, to be in touch with us. Please share your questions, expertise, perspectives also maybe on how to use this tool and the relevance it could have for you on 6NR. I have not yet received anything, so do not be shy. We'll be happy to answer any of your questions. In the meantime, is there anything maybe that either Chrissy, Annie, you, Marion, or Antonio would like to add to what we already said? Okay, we have a very quiet group today. Any question from anyone, any experience, any national perspective you would like to share with colleagues? We have gathered you by regions and time zone and languages on purpose to try to create this conversation on the use of spatial data. So you are all pretty much coming from the same area of the Earth. So feel free to share maybe how spatial data have been useful to conserve a specific ecosystem. Ecosystems do not respect borders, so you may have actually a neighbor undertaking the same actions.
Mario, if I can just jump in, since there are no questions for the moment. Earlier during the presentation, we had a question about someone, not a question, but more a comment about someone from Guyana. And I was thinking maybe it would be interesting to show how the Guyana, for example, project will look like, to give a good overview of the data currently contained in the project, so that also maybe all the other countries have a good idea of the data that we have right now.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent idea.
So if I could just share my screen.
For sure. Let me just give you the authorization. No.
All right, is this working?
Not yet. Wait a second, it's coming. I can't see it for now. Do Annie and Chrissy, can you see the screen of Marion?
Yes, I'm able to see it on my end.
Okay, perfect. Then move forward.
Okay.
It's on my connection.
Okay, you should be able to see right now the UN Biodiversity Lab, and it's focused right now on Guyana, as you can see. Just to give an overview, because right now we don't have any questions, I just wanted to show you how it looks like in real. So for the moment, what you see right now is the biodiversity data that are activated. So for example, we have some data about the biodiversity intactness that you can see right now, and you can easily spot which area in Guyana is really biodiversity hotspot, or other types of data. And there was earlier someone talking about the time series data. We do have some time series data, for example, for the last of wilds from 93 that I'm just activating right now. And if you want to make a comparison, you can just activate the one of 2009, and you can see the changes that occurred in that region. Again, during the presentation, Annie was mentioning the rarity data set still in biodiversity. And again, you can easily spot which are the hotspot biodiversity in the region. Another type of category is for example, the climate and carbon, which is a key asset for all the countries. So here we have selections of various data related to above ground biomass or carbon, etc., that I can just activate. As you can see, well, actually maybe this one is not the best example, but you can see the variation of carbon inside the country. Or also maybe a data set that would have much interest for Guyana is the mangrove forest soil, and you can see here, if you want to zoom, where are the key areas for the mangroves. So I think this is just to give an overview of the data available. And since we're talking about how the data are sorted inside the platform by theme and also by IQ Biodiversity target, you can see that if you activate a category, it will actually mix all the data from all the themes that are relevant for that category. So if you are willing to report on the IQ Biodiversity target number 5, you will find in this category all the data sets that are relevant for that. And I think this is an example. I just give the micro to you, over to you, Marion.
Thank
If
you.
if there are any questions, just feel free to jump in and to ask anything.
Actually, we received a question in the meantime, and thanks for the demonstration and sharing your screen. We have a question from Hannah. Hannah, I'm not sure what country you're working with. Maybe you can precise that. But she's asking, is there a direct link between the lab project and the reporting tool, or are we required to download then use the maps for the report? So Chrissy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can take this question on. Okay, Hannah is from Belize. Hi, Belize. There is no direct link for now in between the lab project and the reporting tool. However, how we showed it during the webinar, you can create those relevant maps that can support your analysis, and then take a screenshot of them and integrate them directly. So we had discussions with the CBD, and they slightly changed the online reporting tool for you to be able to upload those screenshots directly in the report, so you do not have to put them as annexes at the end of the report. That's important because we all think those maps are much more relevant if they are in the middle of the report and supported by analysis, conclusions, recommendations that you can make. So that's what I can say about the link that does not exist yet in between the online reporting tool and the lab. It does not exist also because it does take a lot of capacity to create, and as we mentioned before, the UN Biodiversity Lab is supporting the 6NR, of course, but not only, and so we're hoping that we can use after that. I hope I'm answering your questions. And I'm seeing I know Hannah, sorry, of course. Yeah,
this is Chrissy Supples. I just want to jump in and say, great response. There's a little bit of a correction. So the way that each person would choose to use maps for each of the Aichi biodiversity targets, or the way that their MBSAP is created, is different. So we looked at creating, like, put a map in here, or for this question you need a map, and it really doesn't work that way because it is so particular to each of your countries. So what we encourage you to do is identify the base maps that are needed and the maps that are helpful to address several of the Aichi biodiversity targets like we discussed in this call, and then to include maps. The CBD has modified the online reporting tool for you to be able to upload those PDFs, so you can incorporate them quite easily, but it's not something that would just go from one platform to the other.
Thanks for clarification, Chrissy. I hope Hannah is answering the question. And I saw that you sent another question and I asked for clarification. If you can send me those clarification anytime during this Q&A, I'd be happy to share the question with my colleagues. In the meantime, we have a question from Golam, who's asking if there is any scope of using the system as guest user.
So I'm just going to answer that question. If you are not, if you don't have any special rights inside your project, you can absolutely visit the project as guest user. I guess this is what you mean. So I'm just going to actually show you right now. If you're going to, I heard we had someone from Belize. So I'm just going to go in Belize and activate a category of biodiversity. You can see that the page is pre-populated with all the data. So these data are visible for the public for the moment, meaning everybody, even if you don't have any special privileges like administrator, members of the project, or publishers, etc., can see those data. However, if you're working in Belize and if you would like some of the data to be maybe private, or to hide them to special people and maybe only the members of the project be able to see them, you have the possibility also to restrict the data. For the moment, we pre-populated all the projects with this series of data layers that are accessible for everybody. So as a guest user, you can just join, not join, but just visit the country page of the project and navigate through the project, navigate through the data, and just conduct the analysis that you want without being part of the project. But then if you would like to be part of the project, The only thing that you have to do is actually to click on the join request, and then an email will be sent to the administrator. Does it answer the question?
I think it does, and of course we can have more questions coming from you after. But thank you, Marion, for providing that element of response. And following that, actually, we have Golam asking if a guest user can upload or download data from the lab.
So to be able to so there are two different things. Sorry. If you want to download data, anybody can download data if the data is open access. If the data is open, anybody can download the data. However, to upload data inside the project, you need to be a member who has the rights to upload data in the project. It's two different things.
Great.
Sorry, does it answer the question?
I think it does for sure. Yeah. And then we have
Marion,
another.
just could I ask Marion Planck for a quick follow-up? Could you describe a little bit to everyone? So if you're not associated with the 6NR project, you can also join UN Biodiversity Lab just at the global layer. You'll see it on the site as UN Biodiversity Lab World. So you can register as a user for that. Marion, could you give a little bit more information about that and how it differs?
Maybe I can just give you a demo. So if you're a complete external user and you're not working with the 6NR, the landing page, actually, I'm just going to redo the process. The landing page will be this one. If you're interested in the world data, just activate the world. Actually, it will be automatically in the world. But then, so as I was showing before, you can navigate through the country pages. But then if you would like to join a particular project, all you have to do is to click on the tab. And then, sorry, it's a bit slow today because of the technology of the webinar that is a bit demanding for the computer. But otherwise, what you have to do is just to type the name of the project that you're looking for and just to ask to join the project. If you don't want to join the project because you don't want to be, for example, a member of the UN Biodiversity Lab Guyana project, you can just visit the project by clicking on the link. And again, you'll have the possibility to see all the data that I'm showing to you right now. This is actually actually inside the Guyana project. And all the categories here will give you some information about how to use the UN Biodiversity Lab and how to use the functionalities of the UN Biodiversity Lab. But again, this page that you see right now is for is the page for the external users or the guest users. I'm not a member of the Guyana project, but this is the public views that are available in that project. If I were a member or publisher or the administrator of that project, maybe I would be able to see extra data that have been uploaded by the Guyana administrator and publishers. Does it answer the question?
I think so. Annie, does it?
Yeah, I was also just wondering about showing how you can join the UN Biodiversity Lab World from the list of projects. It's the very top one.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand actually.
That's okay. We can follow up later.
Sorry, you mean just to access the world page, which is this one? Annie?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that's fine for now. Thank you.
Okay.
And we have also a question from Helena, who's asking if we can confirm that the email address to access the site by the 6NR team leaders. So which email address is it?
So for the moment, I think a list of the email address of the 6NR focal points have been shared with our technical team to make them administrators. So I guess the answer is the email address that you've provided. I assume it's the, I don't know, professional email address. But what is important to remember is that it's important to always log in with the same email address. So you won't have to log in each time because the computer remembers that you've connected to the UN Biodiversity Lab. But if you have to re-log in the platform, you should use again the same email address. So I guess that you shared your professional email address as as a focal point.
So Helena, I see that you're writing support at unbiodiversitylab.lab, and no, it's not this one. So for now, as Marion just mentioned, we have invited one person from the 6NR team to be the administrator of the national project, and for now, this person, at least for UNDP, is the country office UNDP country office focal point. So it's this person. If you're in touch with this person, then you can just request probably to be part of this project. We have done so, but we can add one more, or actually several administrators. We advise to keep one administrator for efficiency matters and responsibility also. But you can definitely engage with this person and be added as administrator if that's the goal you would like to achieve.
Yes, if I can just jump in and add something to that. As Marion was saying, for the moment, the administrators have been automatically the 6NR focal points of each country. But if you find out that it's not maybe the best person to be the administrator of your project, you simply have maybe to discuss with that person and to request to be administrator of the project. But as Marion was saying, for the management of the platform, of the project, etc., it's always better to have one single administrator. So maybe you can just discuss with your colleague and see which one, who would be the best administrator, let's say, of the project.
I hope, Helena, that answers your question. I see James has his hand raised. James, I'm opening your microphone. Can you speak?
I can indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you again for an interesting presentation. This will seem really basic, I'm afraid, but I don't actually know who the relevant focal point would be for the United Kingdom. Is there a way of finding a list of people so I know who to get in touch with?
I assume there is a CBD focal point also.
The CBD focal point, but I don't know who the UN country focal point for UNDP would be. So that's my confusion, perhaps.
It's a good question. CC, do you have any element of response in that?
That's a great question. I don't actually know, because I know for the JEF project, we only work with developing, middle income and small island nations. So UNDP isn't a country that we would work with on this project, but there would be somebody developing the 6th national report, and the CBD focal point is probably the person to direct who this is.
Yeah, I mean, the issue here is that I'm actually the person who's coordinating the production of the 6th national report, but I'm not actually in a core government department, I'm in an agency. So right. I'm slightly confused who I need to be talking to.
Yeah, I think the CBD focal point would know.
That's fine. I'll talk to the CBD national focal point. That's really not a problem. I just wanted to check that it was that person I should speak to, rather than there being somebody else in a completely different administration chain that I needed to try and work out who it was I was dealing with.
No, not at all. I don't think UNDP has a focal point for the UK.
That's fine.
But I'm going to find out the answer.
Can I make one other technical point with respect to administrators? I appreciate what you're saying in terms of a single administrator, but that also puts a potential point of fragility into the whole project as a whole, in so much as people moving on, or heaven forbid, somebody having an accident and not being available. So I think, can I just ask you to think about whether or not there is a backup system for that, just to make sure that if something drastic did happen, then there wouldn't be a hiatus in access to the information, which could potentially, of course, be at a critical point.
Yes, for sure. Thank you for that. I mean, are there any, maybe Marion or Antonio wants to answer this bit more technical aspect?
I think for the technical aspect, I would let Antonio maybe provide an information. I'm afraid I don't have the technical answer.
I can answer, yes, but can you please repeat it because I was concentrated on another technical aspect.
Not a problem at all. Sorry about that. What I was thinking about is if you've got a single person as the administrator, and that person moves on to another job, perhaps leaves the department, perhaps, and this is the sort of thing that could easily get forgotten in handover, that to have a second administrator or a backup administrator such that all of a sudden the country didn't lose the ability to be able to manage their project struck me as potentially the sort of thing that might be worth considering in terms of how to try and make sure that the system continues to be available overall.
It's a good point for the technical answer to that. I think we don't have the answer yet, but that's indeed a good point that is raised here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, what I can answer on this is that if you have an administrator of a project and then something like this happens, it's normal. This administrator should just do one small thing before quitting the job. It's just designating another administrator, and he has the right to do so. So it's just a matter of be consistent in the job till the end. It's just a one click and then that's it. And in case things happens, it's not possible, then you can always write us and we can assign administrator rights to another person.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was purely and simply just thinking about it. Having been a network administrator for one of our IT systems many years ago, it was the sort of thing where you didn't have only one person in a role for precisely that problem. And I actually do have literally personal experience of knowing somebody who literally fell under a bus. So it can happen to be something that they haven't actually had the opportunity of passing something on because actually they had an accident. It's a purely theoretical thing at the immediate point. It was just thinking about trying to make sure that there was a little bit of belt and braces in that approach.
Yeah,
but
I hope we won't have to face such a dramatic situation, but it's a good point to be discussed actually. Thank you.
Yeah, but we can cover on this, so no problem from the technical side, let's say.
Okay,
only
good.
For this.
Great. Thank you for the questions and for the answers. I'm having actually Hannah asking 2 more questions and a clarification on emails. Have emails been sent to the CBD focal points or UNDP focal points? It's UNDP focal points for now. And these are the people who are currently designated as the administrators of the sandbox. But not forever, of course, if it seems to you that it would be relevant that another person takes this role on. And that's a question for Marion. Hannah is also asking, who's making the request, the administrator or the person requesting? I'm guessing to join the project.
Sorry, which request in particular to join the project?
I think to join the project, yeah.
Okay, actually, so there are 2 ways of being part of a project. The first one is that the person can directly ask to join. As I was showing earlier. Let me do it right now. Sorry, it's a bit slow again. It's pretty slow right now. Sorry, I think the webinar is taking all the. Let me just refresh the page. Anyway, while it's logging, it's loading. The first way is just to ask directly to join the project by clicking on join nearby the project. But as an administrator, you can also ask someone directly to, you can send an invite basically to someone. So if you're an administrator, you can just add the email address of someone that you would like to see in the project, and this person will receive an invite. Once the person will click on the link in the invite, that person will become a member of the project. And then the administrator will have the possibility to upgrade, let's say, this member of the project, to make it a publisher, etc., to upgrade the rights. Does it answer your question?
Let me see if there is any follow-up question from Hannah. And Hannah say yes, thank you. Perfect. Hannah, if you have more questions, please feel free to share with them. We have another question from Therese Yard asking, it was mentioned that some data sets are not downloadable and some are not because they have a view-only license. Is there a way to tell which ones are downloadable and which one are view-only? Also, is it correct that maps can only be exported by people who are project members?
So concerning the map question, you can just take a screenshot or click on that button to generate the screenshot of the map, etc. So everybody can do it. For the download question, that's a good question. I won't be able right now to provide you with the complete list of the dataset that can be downloaded, but that's something that we can easily share. As an element of answer, I would say that it really depends on the data provider, and if the data providers agrees to have data downloadable and also to allow users to download plus reshare the data. So that's really something we do not control, and for that reason, not all the data are downloadable. But that's something we can share the list, I think, in a separate link or maybe in the presentation, something like that.
For sure. Thanks, Marion. Therese, I hope this answers the question. I don't see any question for now. I'm gonna look if there's some hand raised. Oh, I actually see Therese that say yes, thank you. So thanks for providing the answer. Are there any other questions from the group so far? Maybe two last before we jump to the conclusion remarks.
Yeah, since we have some time, this is Chrissy. I'm wondering if anyone in the group wants to have some dialogue on the types of maps that they need for the NBSAP. Have they jumped into the UN Biodiversity Lab and tried to use them? Have they found other data sources that are very helpful to them? And what types of specific technical support do they think they're going to need from here to be able to use spatial data more thoroughly in their 6 national reports? Sorry, I said NBSAPs, but I meant 6 national reports.
And NBSAPs later. I do not see anyone sharing thoughts.
Well, I can just share if folks aren't up for dialogue right now. If that's something that you want to carry on a dialogue about over email, we'd love to hear more of your perspective and figure out the best ways to support you moving forward.
And I'd say also we can encourage you to share those thoughts on the NBSAP forum. We're having many experts on this forum that would be happy to interact with you, and also counterparts from national teams that probably share the same ideas or the same thoughts. So please feel free to initiate a regional discussion, let's say, or a discussion with your peers. Since I do not see any other questions nor hand raised, I'm going to turn over to you, Chrissy, for the concluding remarks of this webinar.
Thank you, Marion, and thank you to the other speakers. As we wrap up today, I just also want to send a warm thanks to everyone who attended this session. We look forward to continued engagement with you as you begin to access and use the UN Biodiversity Lab to support the preparation of your 6th national report. You have our emails, you have our Skypes, and we're here to support you in whatever ways are needed. Before we close, I just wanted to draw your attention to several key resources that can support you to use the UN Biodiversity Lab. First, we have a briefing note that you can use to share an overview of the lab with your colleagues, and it's available in English, French, and Spanish. We also are producing technical guidance to train you in the analyses specific to each of the Aichi biodiversity targets that Annie discussed earlier in this presentation. And we're hoping to release that around the timing of the technical webinars in September. And you can also check out our FAQs on the website or contact support@unbiodiversitylab.org. And then last, we encourage you to join the 3 in-depth technical trainings that we'll be offering in September and October. when you registered for the when you registered for the 6th National Report Technical Webinar Series, you're automatically registered for all of the webinars that we offer. So on September 13th, again, we'll be talking about how to upload national data sets. On September 18th, we'll be talking about how to use spatial data to make conservation decisions. And then on October 2nd, we'll show you how to use story maps to communicate the value of biodiversity. But just also let you know that once we get past these spatial planning webinars, we'll be turning our attention to indicators. And so you can look for data or webinars on that later in the year. As mentioned earlier, this is the first of many trainings, but success of this platform will be based on continued dialogue with you, the users, and we look forward to building that relationship.
Thanks, Chrissy, and thank you to all of the attendees that joined today. As I said, we will post this webinar recording on the NBSAP Forum YouTube channel, and all of the presentations will be on the NBSAP Forum, and you will receive an email with the links to the recording, presentations, and resources that Chrissy just mentioned that you saw on the screen. I hope you all enjoyed this session. I wish you to have a really nice day or evening based on where you are. And we look forward to your active engagement on the UN Biodiversity Lab. This concludes the webinar.